This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. Tonight's episode is not going to be very long, actually. I want to talk about some information that members of my team have brought to me and some things to be considered. Um, be interesting to bring somebody on to actually have a conversation about these things and get some input from others. But let me just present it tonight, and then we'll get some guests on here soon to talk about these things more in depth. The Columbus Community Housing Development Organization is what we call CHODO, has been purchasing a lot of property over the last 10 years. Especially, um, it's curious to me if how they generated the funds to do this. It's not clear to me exactly, but if it's using public funds, federal HUD grants, or it's funneling money through Columbus Housing Authority over into the Chodo, this opens up a lot of legal and financial points that could be scrutinized. So let's talk about this. The first one is uh, could this movement of money to purchase and maintain these properties um, constituting improper use of federal funds for real estate acquisition? Now, bear with me. Let's presume, I'm just suggesting, I'm not saying it's happened because I don't know, that the Columbus Community Housing Development Organization, the nonprofit, used HUD home program funds, CDBG grants, or other federal allocations to buy property. It would have to follow some pretty strict guidelines that are set forth. They're called acquisition guidelines under 24 CFR section 92.206. One, they have to ensure each property was part of an approved housing development plan. They have to maintain full documentation for purchase price, valuation, seller, appraisal, and title work. I'm presuming they've done that. Here are the risks. If the properties were purchased without HUD approval, without fair market valuation, or were not used for housing purposes, this could trigger a few things with HUD. Mostly HUD sanctions, could trigger some repayment demands, and it could result in the loss of their nonprofit status of both the Columbus Housing Authority and their nonprofit Columbus Community Housing Development Organization, what I call CHODA. Let's say, for speculation's sake, that CHODO is actually a shell entity and it's really just a real estate holding company. Now, if this organization, CHODO, this nonprofit, exists primarily to acquire property on behalf of others, or essentially shielding Columbus Housing Authority transactions, it may qualify as an improper nonprofit conduct, thus violating the IRS 501(c)(3) purpose. There could be a conflict of interest if board members had personal interests in property locations or resale. Now, here's some examples of some legal violations. One is self-dealing real estate transactions. That's Mississippi Code sections 79-11-267. Nonprofit inurement. In other words, using a nonprofit status for private gain. That's a big no-no. They could be in violation of the Mississippi Nonprofit Corporation Act and failing to act in public interest. Now, what if their purchases um, fail to have been developed or they don't have these acquired properties occupied? Case in point, Palmer Home. property. So, we're looking at this as if this is, we're only implying, we're not saying that it has, but there is a pattern of acquisition without follow through, specifically in the Palmer properties and in the North Haven Woods properties. Even though those are rented, that wasn't what they originally were set up to do. Um, if the property was acquired and never developed, never rented to low-income residents, and sat vacant or was flipped, it could constitute fraudulent use of housing funds. What are some of the federal implications of this? Well, HUD requires 5 to 20 years of affordability compliance depending on funding source, like the home program, per their regulations. Vacant or underused properties can lead to audit findings and fund recovery, which I think they could be in danger of with the Palmer property. Improper property transfers or lack of public oversight um, is another possible problem area. If Chodo acquired the property using Columbus Housing Authority support, but the transfers weren't publicly disclosed, this could violate multiple things. The Mississippi Open Records Law, which is all real estate transactions by a public or public adjacent entity must be transparent, could violate HUD conflict of interest clauses. 24 CFR 92.356 prohibits board members or related parties from benefiting from transactions. Now, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to start pulling some Lowndes County land records to list all properties under the Chodo name. I'm going to verify the purchase dates and I'm going to look at the funding sources. I'm going to compare the acquisition dates to Columbus Housing Authority meeting minutes. Were these purchases discussed or approved publicly? I'm going to request the full IRS 990s from Chodo, not just the ones that I can find online, because those have some parts that have been omitted. I'm going to check those Schedule Bs for property holdings and disclosures. And then I'm going to look into whether any construction or rehab ever took place by looking for permits, inspections, occupancy, etc., etc. Now, this is just a start. Um, but these things are wandering around in my head. Because remember, I was telling you about my concerns about what's going on over at Chodo based on what I'm seeing in the Columbus Housing Authority's um, meeting minutes, their bank records, their credit cards, the general rundown appearance of the Palmer home property that they've purchased, and the amounts of money that are being moved around from account to account to account before they finally that money gets transferred over to Chodo and they call it a gift. Um, Also, there's been a house there's actually been two houses that have been sold over at the Columbus Community Housing Development Organization over at Chodo. And I can't really find what they did with the money that came from the sales of those two houses. It's all very curious, isn't it? That's not to say that it's not there. I just can't find it um, in their financial reports that they file in their monthly meeting minutes. Anyways, I told you this would be short. I wanted you to see exactly what I'm looking at and where my brain's going, and some of the stuff my team's working on, and what we're finding. So, um, it's a hot, muggy night in Mississippi. I've got my hair pulled back. I've got on a sleeveless shirt, and I'm digging in to the details. And I keep looking to see if any of this makes any sense. And right now, I still can't make any sense of it, except to wonder, um, are they using Choto to launder the monies that are coming out of the Columbus Housing Authority? Gosh, I hope not. I'm just curious. I can't for the life of me figure out where all that money's going and why. Why are they buying all these properties when they're not using them? What's the purpose? Um, it's, I mean, you have acres and acres of land sitting unused and undeveloped. You have all these cottages. Um, you have a gym. You have a beautiful dining facility. You've got a Victorian building there, and it's unused and it's sitting neglected and vacant. And they have all this money they're channeling over there, and yet they're still overdrawn at the bank. And I don't know. There's just all kinds of weird things going on. And so, um, I don't know. I can't figure it out. Maybe you can. Um, it just gets curiouser and curiouser. But one thing that's really interesting to me is how angry and how defensive people are when I ask questions about this project and these buildings. And nobody wants to answer just a straight up simple question. Anyways, that's all I got for tonight. Until next time, I'm Shannon Evans, and this is the Tom Bigby Tales.